stand because like I said, from the emerging from the first point that I made, that technology is going to play a much more important role in the competitiveness of nations, competitiveness of economies going forward like no other time in the history of mankind. And if you take these two broad points, I would make the following cases for your respectful consideration. All of you are very experienced in both government and in technology. Most of you are more experienced in government than I am, for sure. I will argue that I have a little bit more experience in technology than some of you, but I will make the following cases. First is, I think our roadmap to technology and innovation and R&D has to be more urgent, much more driven by urgency. Our timelines have to be less gradual and more urgent. Urgency, I say, because the next 2 years, I believe, and I've used this phrase in the past, are like the Y2K moment for the world in terms of technology and innovation and the digital economy. So urgency. The second point I would put forth for all of your consideration is that out of the various R&D projects in the government of India and our overall ecosystem, we need to make them more outcome oriented, much more sharply focused on what is the result of the R&D, what is the outcome of the R&D, whether it is IPR, whether it's product, whether it's technology. Third is, and I think this point was referred to by Secretary Rajaraman and I think even DG CSIR, that this concept of collaborative development, collaborative R&D, is a concept that we need to move into reality and make it much more, demonstrate a lot more efficacy. And I mean government to government, between DOT and MeitY, between MeitY and CSR, between DST and other ministries, creating an all of government approach towards development and the future of technology, rather than ministry-led, silo-led. And including, by the way, I believe that into this collaborative approach, we must bring in the private sector as well. Some months ago, I had an occasion to work with the principal scientific advisor on the issue of scientific clusters. I would urge him to revisit that. I think it is time for that concept to be actualized and realized and made into policy. This issue of creating science and technology clusters around our universities and industry is a good idea whose time has come. The next point I want to just mention is this issue of standards leadership. It is time that India, as a global leading country on technology and innovation, plays a much more defining role on global standards. Whether it is 3GPP, whether it is ICANN, whether it is in other areas of science, technology, biotechnology, whatever. I think India needs to play a much more defining role in the standards leadership going forward. There was some reference to skilling and talent. I completely agree with those findings by these breakout sessions. It is an area that we, again, not just as a skill ministry or a MeitY or DOT, we need to find a way for the whole of government to address this issue of how do we build skills and how do we build an ecosystem that generates and develops those skills for the young Indian that is interested in the future of technology. Again, thank you, Professor Vijayaraghavan, for having this webinar. And I unfortunately missed the morning session because I was in the airport receiving students from Ukraine. I think I did that after Professor Dr. Jitendra Singh had just finished his reception of students. But that was a very energizing experience. And again, thank you for this webinar. And I hope out of this will emerge something that is a much more coherent, all of government strategy and approach towards all things technology for India and the future of India and future of the India's decade. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for reassuring and reasserting the need for embedding technology and innovative solutions for the betterment of human life. Now, I request Honorable Minister of State, Independent Charge for Science and Technology, Minister of State, Independent Charge for Earth Sciences, and Minister of State for Atomic Energy, Space, Prime Minister's Office, Personal, Public Grievances and Pensions, Dr. Jitendra Singh Ji, to guide us through the deliberations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Honorable Minister Shri Ashwini Vaishnav ji, Shri Rajiv Chandrasekhar ji, sitting beside me, the PSA Dr. Vijay Raghavan, Science and Technology Secretary Dr. Chandrasekhar, Biotechnology Secretary Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, CSIR DG Dr. Shekhar Mande, Secretary Earth Sciences Dr. Ravi Chandran, all the members of the faculty, and connected with us, the colleagues from the MIT. It's been a good learning experience over the last nearly 5 hours. I've been trying to hop among these sessions. So I was physically here attending some of these sessions which were being hosted by Science, Technology and CSIR, and trying to connect myself with the MIT, particularly in sessions like the one dedicated to data, the other session geospatial, e-waste, etc. I must compliment the organizers and the scientific program planners. Very intelligently, very futuristically, the themes had been decided upon. So picking up from the first session when Prime Minister addressed us and laid emphasis repeatedly on innovation, and he said this brainstorming over the day should rather be more aiming at bringing in ease of living for the common citizen through innovation rather than being a very heavy change of thought. So when I look at innovation, I think sometimes we tend to think of innovation only the terms through tend to look at it through the prism of science and through the prism of technology, where innovation is a much wider term. And if you see minutely, when we write science, technology, innovation, we write science, technology, and innovation. We don't write scientific innovation. We don't write technology innovation or technological innovation, because in English language, even each word has a separate meaning, and even similar sounding words have a different connotation. So innovation, if it has to ultimately aim at bringing in ease of living, it has to be both at the scientific level, it has to be at the industrial level, and it has to be both also at extra scientific, extra industrial level. And then a synergism of all would be possibly the most optimum combination. And I think for that, what is also required is more of awareness amongst ourselves and awareness among others about us and among us about others. So we have in the last few months started a process of having joint meetings of all the science ministries and science departments sitting together, including Atomic Energy and Space, which are not actually, even though headquartered in Delhi. Similarly, today also we are trying to work on the same lines, and then also sit individually with each of the ministries. Like, for example, in Jal Shakti, the CSIR recently offered the technology of heli-borne groundwater detection, which possibly was not very much known in that ministry, but now they have taken up the project in a big way. So now we have about 38 ministries which have come forward with applications for different technological interventions or technological assistance from the scientific ministries. So, and we did this exercise way back in 2015-16 and then realized the benefits of it. That is one thing. The other, now adding to what Rajiv was saying about the budget, of course, this budget is not only hugely giving a priority to science and the scientific projects, scientific schemes which were not hitherto seen, but at the same time also giving a lot of space to the private sector. Now just look at the defense sector involving about 25% of its defense research being carved out for the private sector. So that's also a huge departure from the past, because the Prime Minister has actually broken many a taboos of the past, like unlocking of space has happened, which also is going to somewhere supplement our budget, our budget allocations. We have entered into joint ventures in atomic energy. Similarly, the drone regulations have also been revisited, given otherwise what was happening was that we were developing drones, but we were developing them surreptitiously in the premises of IIT, because IIT had the mandate of producing drones for research purpose. So there's a huge departure, and I think the milieu is much more favorable for both scientific work, scientific experimentation, scientific research. The other part is the translation part, and one of the industry members in one of the groups in the forenoon, I heard him repeatedly, and I think Dr. Chandrasekhar in his sum up was also mentioning to that, the importance of translating research for the purpose of industry. I think that would also become easy if we integrate more closely, because we don't integrate that closely or optimally enough. So we actually are not able to translate. If we are able to translate each other amongst ourselves, everything that I own gets translated to the other person. So it has to be integration both within the science ministries and science departments, then the science ministries, science departments with the other sectoral ministries, and then of course the outside extra science, that would be industry, that would be startups, that would be private sector. And the other aspect which I have been strongly feeling over the last few months is that the issue of sustainable startups. Now, it's become very fashionable talking about sustainable goals. But I think someday we will also start thinking with concern about sustainable startups. Because what is happening is that we give certain support to startups, whether financial or otherwise. The project goes through, but the startup is lost, the team is lost, the individuals are lost, because maybe we are not able to link that project enough with the livelihood avenues. So someday the youngster sees an advertisement of civil services in a newspaper, fills in the form, and becomes a babu. So a scientist ending up as an undersecretary. So that kind of scenario, for that, I think one of the practical solutions is that we have a number of, because one of the industry representatives was complaining this morning, I think the onus has to be on them. Let the industry be a stakeholder in our startup program. Many of our bodies, whether the societies, governing bodies, even in CSIR and scientific bodies, have industry representatives as members. So it adds to their profile definitely, because they've been members for so many terms or whatever in a governing body of CSIR, etc. But for us, it ends up just receiving their good advice or wise or words of wisdom. If they invest in the actual sense, let them decide what kind of expertise they are looking for, what kind of experts or skilled hands they are looking for. We'll provide the know-how, we'll train the startup, we'll also will facilitate the project. But if they invest in the project right from the beginning, then they will not bank out that easily, and the startup would also have somewhere to go back. So that is one thing. The other part is we have started a program, and I would like it to be shared with the other ministries and the members of the fraternity as well. The mentoring. You see, you would have noticed, I was saying this to the colleagues in the education ministry also. If you do a survey at class 12 level, the maximum number of students are from the science streams. So then why do we have this complaint that we have very few scientists who actually come out with some meaningful projects? Is that because they are not there because of aptitude, or they are looking for something else? They are looking for a good score to get into a NEET exam or to get into IIT JEE exam, if not that, to become, to clear a civil services exam. So if we have some kind of a mentorship program or a cutoff, which could actually enable us, what we are doing often is that we are there to provide support, help, even funding to those who come to us. If we could have a search mechanism, and then we could mentor them right from the beginning, right from the younger age, maybe at the class 10 age, before they get corrupted by their own parents who start sending them to all kind of coaching centers. So that could be a long-term answer to what the complaint was repeatedly being made this morning. And as Rajiv was mentioning, the private sector privacy, I said the time is not very far when this demarcation is going to end. We are going to have project-based themes, and the private and the public sector would learn that they cannot survive without each other. And there's no option now. Integration is no longer an option. It's now an essential. It's a necessity now. And therefore, I think it's been a very good brainstorming in the sense that we actually could also understand each other's concerns and And of course, the data part, that session was quite interesting, hosted by the mighty. I've been of the strong view that we need Indian data for Indian solutions. Similarly, the Indian data for the Indian regimens for the treatment of Indian diseases. That is something that we have to actually focus upon, which we are lacking somewhere. And I'm sure with the kind of geospatial and the other options now available to us, we would be able to make a headway in that as well. I once again compliment the PSA and the entire team, but I think this session happened because the budget happened. But honestly speaking, this should have happened otherwise. So I think one thought to carry home is also, why are we sitting now? Just because Prime Minister asked us to sit after the budget. But what we have discussed is beyond budget. And I think this would make our exercise wholesome if we keep sitting more frequently. In fact, in our ministries, which are size-based, we've already started this process. We also then start liking each other's faces and, get used to each other and get to work together. Thank you very much, Raji. Thank you. Thank you, Vaishnavi. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Sri Ashwini Vaishnavji, Minister of Communication, Electronics and Information Technology and Railways, to enlighten us on his views on the deliberation of the day.
Thank you. My colleague ministers, Dr. Jitendra Singh ji, Sri Rajiv Chandrasekhar ji, Principal Scientific Advisors, Dr. Vijay Raghavan ji, Secretaries of various departments. As Honorable Prime Minister said in the beginning, this is a listening session. This is not a speaking session, so I will not take more than 3 minutes. Maybe I'll just make 4 short points. As we all know, this budget was a path-breaking budget in the sense that the focus on capital investment and the focus on technology-led growth, these were very distinctly laid out and clear budgetary allocations were made. And as a follow-up of that budget, we are having this discussion where lots of industry participants, lots of academia, all the stakeholders are today on the same page, same table. The 4 brief points I would like to make here are, while going through the presentations, these are points which I jotted down while going through the presentations of various groups. Yes, we have made very big difference in the manufacturing of, let's say, electronics items, very soon telecom products. But that's something which we need to take to a very different, totally new level, is what I could sense from the presentations. Now, the thought process is absolutely in the right direction, but what are the exact action items that needs to be taken? PLI and PMI, which are 2 constructs that we have used for promoting domestic manufacturing, have led good results, have given us good results. Beyond this, what else needs to be done? I'll request the industry to come up with suggestions, and maybe beyond this session beyond this webinar that we have today, we should have a continuous process where we can focus more on manufacturing, because each of these manufacturing initiatives is generating a huge number of employment. So that was the first point regarding manufacturing. The second good input which came during the presentations is about the use of spectrum. I'm very happy that our thought process about spectrum is today changing. For a very long period, spectrum was seen as a mere revenue generating resource. The last 2 years have shown the public good element of spectrum. Today, from the presentation of the second group, I am very happy to observe that there is a broad consensus on various spectrum management issues, which are basically leading to a public good or to a technology improvement or a technology development. This we need to now convert into clear policy or legal statements which can be then implemented. Having intent is one thing, but actual execution is more important. That is the second action item I would take away from this entire exercise. Third is about the bigger role for private sector in R&D. I think both my colleague ministers made very good points, and Honorable Prime Minister has taken this very hugely bold decision to have defense and space silos broken and letting the private sector also come in so that they can also innovate and their energies can also be put into good use for the country. I think similar initiative, similar silo breaking needs to be done in many more sectors. We are starting something in railways very soon. Another 7 or 8 days, we would be launching that new policy where private sector R&D would become integral part, or rather a major part of railways R&D budget. We do hope that going forward, probably 90% of railways R&D budget would be in the private sector, compared to 100% in the public sector today. With that policy change we'll be making, similar policy changes we need to make in almost all the sectors, because until and unless we treat our industry, treat our academia, treat our stakeholders as startups and other stakeholders as one with us, rather than we versus them, I don't think we can grow as a country. So we need to take them along. We need to make them part of our ecosystem. The fourth and last point is design-led manufacturing, which Honorable Prime Minister mentioned in the morning. I think the very nice initiative that we have taken in the semiconductor policy is something which needs to be once we see the success of this, then probably it can be replicated in many more sectors. So these are the 4 brief points. First is manufacturing, second is spectrum management, third is bigger role for private sector, and fourth is design-led manufacturing, on which this webinar has given us good action items, and more work we can do on these 4 items. Thank you, Professor Raghavan, for organizing it very nicely. This is a really good platform, and I thank all the participants for giving your thoughts in a very candid way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Vijay Raghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor, to suggest the way forward.
Thank you very much. Shri Ashwini Vaishnav ji, Shri Dr. Jitendra Singh ji, Shri Rajiv Chandrasekhar ji, thank you very much for your interventions, and thanks to all the secretaries for their summary of the breakout session. This has been a very, very valuable meeting, and my job in the next 2 minutes is to thank everyone, which I've done, but also summarize the summary, as it were. We really need to have a rate of acceleration of digitization and have ownership and standards and outcome-oriented collaborative R&D in private sectors. This is a very important message which Shri Rajiv Chandrasekhar gave. The message from Dr. Jitendra Singh ji was a very important one, that Indian data and Indian solutions for the Indian market need to be developed on scale. Behind this simple statement lies a very large number of challenges which we need to overcome going forward, and they relate to the private sector, the public sector, how we interact with our ministries, integrate their demands into action, and so on. And this is something which Mantriji has already initiated, and this is a very important component which we need to take to all the other ministries also, including a major mentoring program, which is very important. Shri Ashwini Vaishnav ji, you very clearly pointed out the difference which is taking place in manufacturing, in electronics and IT. But this is something, when we have very little, going to something is relatively easy, but going from something to much more is a tough challenge. And that is something which you need to take up now, scaling manufacturing for the future as we go ahead. This means pushing hard from intent to execution. Execution poses all sorts of complexities. When you bring down something, something else needs to go up, and vice versa. So this is a interconnected web, when execution therefore needs to take all of that into account. The private sector opening up, which the defense R&D has done now, is something which is very important. And your point about the railway R&D going into the private sector is fantastic. And our national laboratories should also be aggregators of demands and execution through our broader ecosystem, including the private sector. And this is something which has started happening, and we need to push in a very big way. Design is key in today's world. Computers and computer-aided design allow the connectivity of high-level design, right from a shoelace to a space telescope, to be exported. And that adds key value. And when it's connected to manufacturing, brings great income also. So these are the areas which we need to go ahead taking forward. We will continue to be in touch with this entire group over here and with others in our ecosystem. Dr. Saraswat, member Niti Aayog, is here. We do not have time, unfortunately, for interventions from him, but we will consult with him and all the other stakeholders also going ahead. Thank you very, very much. And thank you all for a great session from the morning today. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,